Tashi Delay, and welcome to Tibet Talks. I'm Ashwin Verghese of the International Campaign for Tibet, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's episode. On this show, we have a discussion that promises to provide illumination. Our guest today is a longtime resident of the United States, but she was born in Tokyo, and in fact, she is a descendant of Japan's last samurai. As a fine artist, she has developed a creative aesthetic that was strongly influenced by the philosophies of both Bushido, the moral code of the samurai, and Buddhism. However, our guest's passion in life also lies in philanthropy. 20 years ago, she established Books for Children, an organization that creates children's books and donates them to Tibetan refugees. She has created 6 picture books, including 2 in collaboration with Tibetan communities in exile. Our guest's most recent work is a beautiful book called The Extraordinary Life of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, An Illuminated Journey. And I should mention that that book is now available in our ICT store at www.savetibetstore.org. And we'll include that URL in the comment section of our Facebook Live post. In this Tibet Talk, we'll discuss the book with our guest, and we'll dig into her work on the Tibetan environment, identity, and cultural awareness. So it's my pleasure to introduce her to you now. Please join me in welcoming our guest for today's Tibet Talks, Rima Fujita. Rima-san, hello, and welcome to Tibet Talks.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm just so thrilled and honored. Thank you so much, everybody.
It's our pleasure, and we're so grateful to you for making time to be on the show. I would like to introduce our moderator for today's discussion. She is my colleague at the International Campaign for Tibet, ICT's Interim Vice President, Tensho Getzo. Tensho, with that, I will let you take it away.
Thank you very much, Ashwin. Thank you. Rima-san, it's so lovely to have you with us in conversation here on our Tibet Talks program. We started this program about a year and a half ago, and primarily to bring also to our audience to share how Tibetan culture and Tibetan wisdom has touched so many people, because as you know, International Campaign for Tibet, we are a membership organization, and behind us are hundreds of thousands of people who love Tibet, who care about Tibet, who listen to His Holiness, the Dalai Lama's teachings, and who have been moved by that. And also we have supporters who are challenging what China is doing inside Tibet, who are aware of the situation in Tibet, and who really want to make a difference for Tibetans. But today we're here to talk about you, because you have also a special connection to Tibet, and you have these. So we want to learn more about you. So I want to start by asking you to tell us a little bit about your art, your background. When did you start? How is it? And how do you describe your art? Because it's very unique, it's very vibrant, and it's its own creative process, I think. So could you tell us about that?
Yes. Thank you, Tenjola. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. And I thank everybody at ICT and also Molly, our wonderful friend. And I'm so happy to be here. Thank you. And my art, I was an only child, so I was always spending time alone, especially drawing. And when I was at the first grade, I was already sketching things around me. No one told me to do. I just start doing that. And then I always knew I was going to be an artist. And this style I have right now, I started this style when I was at junior year at Parsons School of Design in New York. And the reason was that I was doing line drawings until then. And I don't mean to brag, but I became really good at it. And everything I drew looked just so good and perfect. And I found it kind of boring because to me, it's also a Japanese aesthetics, but we find beauty in imperfection. Like it's called wabi-sabi in Japan. Maybe you've heard the word wabi-sabi. It means there's beauty in everything, even when it's not perfect looking. And that's the culture I grew up with. So I was drawing and drawing and drawing, and everything I drew looked so good, and I got so bored. So I say, how can I make drawings or paintings without drawing lines? So I came up with this idea. I didn't invent or anything. I'm sure somebody before me did it many times, but I took a black paper and started to lay lines, colors. So in other words, I do a reverse technique that the lines, black lines you see in my art is the color of the surface. So in other words, I do not draw lines anymore. I create the lines by laying colors. But I'm sure you're familiar with, because your husband is a wonderful, wonderful artist. So I'm sure it's nothing new. But that's how I started my style. And ever since I've been working that way. But I also like the fact that I start with the black, because it becomes a little bit philosophical, but it's almost like putting the light on something which already exists, but you cannot see because it's dark. Mm-hmm. So my work is putting the light onto something which already exists, so that people can see and enjoy and appreciate. So it's like my dream, because everything I draw or paint, the visions they come to my dreams. That's all I paint. I used to paint things I can touch, things I can see, tangible things. But nowadays, for many years actually, I only draw and paint the visions I see in my dreams.
Thank you. It's so interesting to hear your process. As you said, my husband is an artist also. He dabbles a little bit, and he talks about lines also, but he talks also about in the Tibetan sense. And he talks how the lines are there, but then the lines have to flow. And it's like a movement. It's not constrained, but it has to be. I'm trying to.
But I understand.
Yes.
I understand.
But so
it's a constant challenge of what to control and what not to control. Ultimately, letting go of the control would be the ideal, right? Like life. Yes. Like in life. Same thing. Same thing in art. Yes. Yes.
So from art to Tibet, you didn't grow up, how did you learn about Tibet, or how did that connection become? Because, we haven't met in person, but I feel like we do, because we have so many layers of connection. We know almost so many people between us that I feel we know you. But you have been connected for a long time with Tibet. How did that start, and can you share that journey as well?
Yes. So everything started with a dream. As I said before, I dream a lot. And one night, many years ago, I heard this voice in my dream, and it said, "Help Tibet now." And it was a commanding voice. And I've always taken dreams seriously. So I went to the library the next day and spent all day there researching about Tibet. Until that day, I really didn't know anything about Tibet, and I didn't even know who the Dalai Lama was, seriously. And then I learned about the tragic history of Tibet for the first time that day. And I was quite shocked and surprised that I had never, known about this. And but then I asked myself, what can I really do for Tibet? Because I'm not a politician or billionaire or a movie star. I'm an artist. So what can I really do? And I kept thinking what I could do. And then all of a sudden, I began meeting Tibetans very naturally. It was very strange in a way, but it was very magical. And I think Tibet matters so much to me because, first of all, I love Tibetan people. I learned so much from them, and really they changed my life. And they're the most unique, kindest people I ever met in my life. So, and also because at that time when I had that dream, I was already doing well as a young artist. I was 20 something, but I was selling well. I was making a lot of money, but I was not happy at all. I didn't like the commercial art world. I didn't like the industry's greed and dishonesty. I was not happy, but I didn't know what else to do. And I kept searching for the meaning of create. Why do I create? Why do I create art? Besides the fact that I loved it, but I didn't know the answer until then. And then when I had that dream, I really believe it was a calling to give me the purpose of why I create art. And I realized that art is not a goal, but it's only a tool to serve others. So that was a life-changing voice in the dream I heard. Then one day I was talking to my very first Tibetan friend ever in my life, and when he told me about his childhood at the refugee camp in South India, I got this idea to create picture books for the Tibetan children to help them preserve their unique language and unique culture. And this is how my Tibetan journey started.
Yes, and talking from that journey, I want to take you to Dharamsala, because from from learning about Tibet through your readings, through your connections with friends that you met in New York, traveling to Tibet is not easy. So to learn more about Tibet, then the first connection is usually to travel to India, to Dharamsala, where His Holiness resides. So how was that? What impact did it have on you? How was that? Was it what you expected? You've learned, read everything, and then you went there meeting with Tibetan community there. How was that experience?
Yes, so I planned to go to India twice or three times. It failed. And something always came up, and I was like, oh. But then somebody said to me, to go to India, you really need an invitation from the divine. And that really made me feel like, okay, it'll come. It'll come naturally, and you don't have to worry. So I waited, and then I planned again. And in 2000, everything just worked beautifully. So I went to Dharamsala for the first time in 2000, and that was my first trip to India also. And it was intense. I mean, I had heard about, India, and I prepared myself, but it was still intense. but I fell in love with Dharamshala, and I felt like I had been there before. It was almost like coming home. I felt so at home there, and it was magical. And for the first time, I stayed at the Nechung guest house because I was studying Buddhism with Nechung monks in New York, and they really took care of me and accommodated me. And the purpose of the first trip was to really visit refugee children. So I spent several days at TCV, and then I went also down to Kollegal in South India to visit schools there. And to be honest with you, I went to India thinking that I would be able to be any kind of help to those kids. But I was so wrong. The Tibetan children were 10 times stronger than me. And I felt so embarrassed to even think that maybe I could do some help, and so I came home thinking like, oh my gosh, I went to India to meet those children, hoping to help them, but I came back. Actually, I learned so much from them, and their resilience and strength were truly amazing.
So, thank you. We've been doing traveling to Dharamsala with our ICT members, and we also come away every time with that same feeling. Our members, going there, you see Dharamsala when I grew up in Dharamsala, but Dharamsala that I grew up was just a little village, and from there, with His Holiness's blessing, it's really become a community and a cultural hub for Tibetans in exile, from monasteries to schools to the library to Nechung Monastery to all these culture centers, the heart center for Tibetans in exile. So you travel to, you yourself are of Japanese origin, you speak Japanese, you came to America, so you're of two cultures and two worlds, and so you have your own, this connection to language and education, and I feel that might be what prompted you to do all these books for Tibetan children. Can you tell us your thoughts on that?
So I moved to New York from Tokyo when I was about 15 years old for my father's business. My dad was a businessman, and it was April. So in Japan, school starts in April. So, and since the schools start in September in the States, I was alone, only with my governess studying English at home every day for several months. And my parents put me into this very highly competitive prep school in New York, where most kids would go to Ivy League universities. And this private school didn't have much diversity at that time. So I tried so hard to fit in because I was lonely and I wanted to make some friends. I felt uncomfortable speaking Japanese, which is my first language. And I tried to copy other kids in order to be accepted. But of course it didn't work. So one day this boy came over to me during the lunchtime, and I was like, wow, because no one really talked to me at school. And he asked me a question, and he said, why all the Kabuki actors are men? And for those of you who may not know what Kabuki acting is, Kabuki is a traditional Japanese theater where all men play female roles. So everybody is a man. And I didn't know the answer because, I was a child and usually young kids in Japan don't have much interest in Kabuki. So I said, I don't know. And this boy said to me, "You're from Japan and you don't even know about your own culture." And he walked away. And I still remember this burning sweat rolling on my back. I was so embarrassed. At the same time, this became my lifetime lesson that you really have to have pride in your roots and in where you come from. And I learned it really quickly as a young kid that this was the key. And then, so this really changed my attitude and behavior and everything. So I felt more comfortable with my own skin. I stopped trying to fit in. I became more relaxed. And then naturally, people came towards me, and then we made friends. I made friends because I wasn't trying too hard, and I was more confident about my identity. So, because your cultural identity is your lifetime asset, it gives you confidence, strength, dignity, integrity. So that was really the experience I had to really, really honor this identity topic. And the language is also deeply connected with identity. So it's extremely important to learn your own language, I really think. And it's, of course, needless to say that education is crucially important to every human being. Yes, so that experience with this boy, really, it's still my life lesson motto today. Even today, when I kind of lose my center, lose my confidence, I go back to that experience and then really honor where I come from. So it was a sour experience, but at the same time, it was a wonderful, wonderful lesson.
Yeah, and for in our Tibetan situation also, with our separated from our homeland, we are all our younger generation. We all growing up in communities that are scattered around the world, and many are facing the same question of, identifying yourself as a dual identity, but and you wear that dual identity so beautifully, so you bridge between both worlds. So that's something that our younger generation are also learning to work on and having to do, as being not losing their Tibetan identity by accepting, say, an American identity, because you're living in both worlds and you bridge both.
Yes.
So we that's one of the conversations we have when we have some youth leadership programs that we organize also. So we work with young Tibetans, and that's some of the conversations we get to have with them also. I want to also ask about some of the books that you have. You have a number of books, and you are such a prolific artist. I was looking at all the artwork that you've done. But can you tell us the book on Tibetan environment? I felt that's something very, very special for you. Those pieces of artwork there, and then the book. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So, Tibet is the third pole, and it's very crucial because of the Himalayas, mountains, glaciers, and rivers, right? So I always wanted to create a picture book to bring this awareness to people and children. People here may think that, oh, what happens in the Himalayas is nothing to do with us, so why care? But since everything is interconnected on this earth, what happens over there will affect everyone on this planet. And I think nowadays everybody knows that. But when I made this book, people were not that much aware of what's happening. on this earth. So I really, really, really wanted to make a book on the environment issue and climate change, and so that's how I ended up making this book.
The environment, and then also all your other books in collaboration with the Tibetan communities. You've done a number of those. Could you just tell us briefly and how they were received by the Tibetan communities
Right. So the health department of CTA approached me and they said, can we make a book with you? We like to make our first sexual health educational book. I said, great, wonderful. I'm honored to be asked. And so when they first approached me, I was visualizing this very practical sex education book that you would see in this country, and which teaches children about safe sex and contraceptives and so on. Something like we're used to have here. But they said, "Oh no, Rimala, we're not there yet." And okay, I said, "Okay, what are you thinking?" And it took them a while to really tell me what they were really looking for. And it was actually that they wanted to make a book of empowerment, especially for girls. And this was the very first time for me to learn the fact that sexual abuse among the Tibetan families and communities were nothing rare. And I was really shocked because I didn't know about it. And I felt so sad, but at the same time, I was deeply moved by the fact that they asked me to make this book because, that means they trusted me. So I was deeply moved to make this book, and I was like, we're going to make a good book. So this was called Rewa, means hope, right, in Tibetan. And we did a essay contest, and kids wrote about their experiences. Some of them are very touching. Some people wrote about their very difficult experiences they had, but they were encouraging other girls and boys to not to stay quiet about the abuse, but talk to somebody. If you can't talk to your parents, talk to teachers, talk to someone, rather than keeping everything inside and suffer by yourself. So it was a very important book. And we were very, very happy with the book. And we distributed thousands of books, among Tibetan refugee schools in India and Nepal. Then I collaborated with the education department to make this book called Tibetan Identity. And what happened was that I wanted to make this book for a long time because every year at a Tibetan party, especially New Year's party, I've witnessed huge fights between Tibetans from India, Tibetans from Nepal, and Tibetans from Tibet. And after a few years, they start fighting, and it becomes really, really bad sometimes. And I've witnessed that a lot. And then this made me really feel sad because especially His Holiness is getting old. And I knew that what's holding the Tibetans around the world together had been the presence of His Holiness. I mean, not only one reason, but he's like the major pillar, right? Mm-hmm. So I was really hoping to have this book which may inspire the Tibetan people to ask themselves again what identity really meant to them and rethink about what's identity, because identity may mean differently to everyone. And it's such a personal thing, like
Mm-hmm.
I had experienced myself. So it's just, this is something you have to experience. This is something you can't be told how to feel or how to think. You have to experience it. So I just wanted to make this book which may inspire or trigger something, especially in young people.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to Dharamshala again, and I talked to the education department, and they were kind of surprised to hear this idea from non-Tibetan person, right? Like, whose idea is this? And I'm like, it's fine. And they're like, wow, let's do it. So again, we conducted this essay contest, this
Mm-hmm.
time from around the world. Anybody from around the world submitted the essays,
Mm-hmm.
what they, what Tibetan identity meant to them. And we made again thousands of copies and distributed. And I think each school had some kind of a workshop based on this book, and they had discussion group, and it was I think it was a really good book also, and I was really really satisfied that we made this book.
Would come. So you have been collaborating and instigating a lot of good conversations around topics of different topics on that level. So thank you, Rima-san, for all your work on those. And next time I'm in Dharamsala, I'm going to look in the school library for your books as well.
Yes, please do.
I will do that. And now, the topic of today's discussion also, I want to now turn to your beautifully illustrated book, The Extraordinary Life of the Dalai Lama. Could you I love how you describe it as an illuminated journey. Could you tell us how this came about?
I'm very happy you liked the title, because that was not the original title. The publisher picked that, and I think it's a great name. The original title was actually oh, I'm blanking out. It was Ocean of Wisdom and Compassion from the Mountains. No, something like that. Anyway, so it was too long. So the publisher came up with this idea, and anyway, so some years ago, one of the representatives of His Holiness requested me to create a picture book of His Holiness's life story, and I felt so honored, and I said, "Are you sure? Are you sure? Should I record this conversation, because I don't want you to tell me later that I never asked you." I was so excited. So, and I wanted to publish this book actually in Japan in Japanese, because over there in Japan, some people still don't know much about His Holiness and his life. So I thought it would be a great introduction or something in depth, to introduce His Holiness with. So I approached top 3 publishers in Japan. I knew them because they've published my books before. But because they were a large company, it took so long coming from this person to next. There's so many phases that I had to go through. So it took a few years actually. I had to wait. I had to submit sketches sometime. It was a long process. And at the end, the top level decided not to publish due to the political reason.
But you did not give up.
No, the editors, they all wanted to do it. But as a huge company, the executives, including president, they think about other issues, right? And they said no. So I talked to the representative again, and he said, "You know what? Let's do it in the States." So Wisdom wanted to do it. So it was great. It was wonderful because Wisdom Publications is so highly respected and they've published many books about His Holiness and of His Holiness also, and His Holiness's books. So I had a full trust and they're wonderful people, honest people to work with. I said, this is great. And so that's how it was created. It took some years, but at the end, I think it was the best.
Oh, it's beautiful. So, since tomorrow, December 10th, marks the day when we all celebrate His Holiness, his Nobel Peace Prize award, and today seems appropriate that we are speaking about his life, your book about his life. And with that, we wanted to share some excerpts for our viewers. I'm joined again by Ashwin, my colleague. And Ashwin, maybe we can play the first excerpt with Rima-san's beautiful art.
I grew up in Tibet at a time when people were free. Many were nomads, and they lived wherever they wanted. My country had vast lands with lush green fields. Ever present on the horizon were white mountains covered with never-melting caps of snow and cascades of icy water. Wild animals were not afraid of humans because hunting was strictly prohibited. There was a humble little village called Takt-Sur in the northeast of Tibet, with golden barley fields surrounded by rolling hills, green forests, and wide prairies. Juniper and poplar trees dotted the landscape, and peaches, apricots, walnuts, and berries grew everywhere, together with sweet-smelling flowers of many different shades. I was born in this beautiful farming village.
That was really beautiful, Rima. Then the photo, the images, and with the mother and the young image of His Holiness like that. It's just beautiful.
The mother looks like you, Tenchola. And especially you played his mother in the movie, and I definitely see the resemblance. But, this book I wasn't conscious about it actually until somebody pointed out. I started this book with his mother and ended this book with his mother. And I thought it was a beautiful coincidence, but because His Holiness often talks about his mother as the first person to teach him compassion.
Yes.
So
His Holiness always speaks about his mother, and His Holiness has his mother's photo also on his desk or in his residence. So that's why. And then the image of the happy family life and the simple village that he grew, I think that had a huge impact on His Holiness, even though it was just the few years of his early life. So I thought you captured that beautifully.
Oh, thank you. I think so too.
Okay, Ashwin, shall we give another little...
I took up residence in a small Indian village called Dharamsala in the foothills of the Himalayas. In that village, I formed the Tibetan government in exile and began building the infrastructure needed to preserve Tibetan culture. At this point, there are about 80,000 Tibetan refugees in India, Nepal, and Bhutan. They had followed me, fleeing Tibet and crossing the border into India. My priority was to build shelters, schools, and hospitals for them. The refugees lived outside in simple, shabby tents. They cultivated the barren soil that no one else wanted and worked hard at growing corn and wheat. Many worked on dangerous road construction sites. Men, women, and children all worked hard to survive, exchanging hard labor for little pay. There were many orphans in Dharamsala who had lost their parents and families, some to the Chinese during the escape from Tibet, and some through construction accidents while they were working. I became a father figure to those children, and they placed all their hopes in me. I was 24 years old.
Rima-san, this photo reminds me of the Dharamsala that I grew up in, my childhood. His Holiness's image looming large like that, with the refugee community around. Our people really lost everything they had, and it was really hard times. And I'm always moved when I think of how the people worked so hard then. The roadside camp workers, even though they could barely feed themselves, they saved money to buy the first car for His Holiness.
Yes, I know. I'm tearing up hearing Ashley read, and I wrote it, but I don't know. It's still moving. So
we forget, when we remember His Holiness's life from growing up in that small village and then moving to Lhasa, the capital, and then losing everything he had, escaping as a refugee to India with his community, and leading up to his vision. Out of nothing, he created, speaking about compassion, bringing Tibetan wisdom to the world out there, and for his people, working so hard and putting Tibet on the world stage so that we can today talk about Tibet, and we still have an campaign and effort around the world towards making a difference for Tibet and trying to keep Tibetan culture alive. So that's quite an amazing journey of His Holiness. And then we had one last slide that we want to share also, Rima. It's one of the ending slides because we wanted to leave away with the message from His Holiness. And I think that's a beautiful message at the end of the book. So we're going to share that, Rima-san.
In the end, kindness is my religion. As I said, the first person who taught me compassion was my mother. My family was not rich, but whenever hungry people or travelers come to our house, my mother always offered them food with a smile on her face, even if she had nothing left for herself. People often ask me wherever I go in the world, "What can we do for you? What do you want us to do?" My wish is only this: cultivate compassion. We human beings are social animals, and no one can live without love and compassion. I ask you to cultivate compassion because by doing so, you will be happier. If you wish happiness only for yourself, you will never be happy, because everything is interconnected and interdependent. You cannot be happy alone while others are suffering, because we are all one.
That was a beautiful ending to the book, Rima. So can you, His Holiness's life story is just so broad. How did you think of ending it with these lines?
Tenshala, it was really strange. It was very similar to how I work when I paint. When I paint, I don't remember anything. I almost go into this trance stage. It's strange. When I look at my work afterwards, I don't remember how I did it. But that's how I've always worked. Writing this book was the same. I read all his biographies, and then I've read many of his books. But when I wrote the text, I wrote everything probably less than in 2 hours. I never really sat down and what should I write next? How should I start this chapter? I never did any of those. I sat down and then I meditated and I start writing, and then it was just effortless. I felt like almost like His Holiness was talking. I could hear his voice, and I just wrote, and then I completed everything in 2 hours. And when I handed to my editor, I said, please feel free to edit or change. They said, no, it sounds like His Holiness is talking, and then we don't have to change anything except some, punctuation thing, the grammar. So I don't know. I don't know how I did it. It was very natural.
But it's beautiful, and it's almost
yes,
like, your collection of thoughts from years and years of
yes,
listening, everything
yes,
came together. So I
I
found
think
it
so.
really.
And yes, thank you. I think I did a good job, not because of me, but because of all these invisible supports I have and I had. I really don't think it's my work. I was the tool again to bring this into manifestation. But what was really working was not me. And I feel very grateful that I had those supports, and so I don't take full credit for this, but I'm very proud to be part of this book as a tool to bring arts and texts and make into a book. But again, please don't think.
We get to all enjoy it. And then I have to also say that the beautiful voice behind the images that we had is my colleague Lizila, who is
Lizzie, sorry.
Lizzie, who is
sorry,
not here with us right now. But
thank you, Lizzie. It was beautiful.
And then I'm going to turn it over to Ashwin now. If we have any questions or from our viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both for really a beautiful, fascinating conversation about your process and how you've arrived to the work that you're doing today. We have a question here from a friend of ours, Mr. Rinchin, who is watching the live stream, and he's actually asking about the image behind you, Rima-san. He is curious about, I think many people are probably watching and want to know, what is that? So we're really curious. The pig. What he wants to know,
yes,
is there a smiling pig?
No. Actually, yes.
Oh.
Actually, it's a piece called Dukkha. It means ignorance, and it's showing the life. Basically, samsara, the cycle of life. So let's see. This woman is standing on dead animals. And above her, there's a new life, which is a baby, and surrounded by boti tree leaves. So it's a kind of a heavy subject, which is samsara, but I wanted to express it in a beautiful way. So you're looking at. Sorry, it's not a nice thing to look at, but. Some animals' life cycle also, but it's also part of life, and it's beautiful.
Absolutely, and that's something that people need to learn about so they can free themselves from samsara, right? So that's part of the beautiful lesson of that. We have another question here from Karma Galton, and he's curious about where he can find your books or your other work or your plans. I know you have a website. Where can people go to learn more information about you and to see more of your work?
Thank you. So this book is at your store,
Yes.
ICT store also. So
Mhm.
you can purchase there too. Also, Wisdom Publication, Amazon, places like that. But to support ICT, I recommend to purchase this at
Yeah.
ICT online shop. And I have a website, rimafujita.com. It's just my name, so all the other informations are there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we definitely recommend people purchase it from our store as well. And my colleague John has shared the link for that on our Facebook Live post. So you can get the link to go straight to Rima's book on our store, but you can also get there by going to savetibetstore.org, and you can find the book there.
Right.
And
Yeah,
certainly make a wonderful holiday gift for people.
yes, I don't sell books from my website, so
Right.
please go to ICT Bookstore or Wisdom Publications.
Absolutely. We have another question here. Curiosity about, so you talked a lot, obviously, in this discussion about the impact that Tibetan culture and Tibetan Buddhism have had on you and your work. I mentioned in the beginning that you were influenced both by Buddhism and also by Bushido in Japanese culture. So there's some curiosity in the questions about what connections you see between the two, and maybe a little bit, if we can hear a little bit more about how Bushido and Japanese culture influenced you as an artist.
Okay, great question. Thank you. Yes, my ancestors were the last samurais. If maybe you've seen the movies before. Yes, and growing up, my grandfathers, they always talked about our ancestors who were the last samurais, how dignified they were and how they carried themselves and lived by those codes. And their basic codes are like justice, courage, compassion, politeness, honor, loyalty, and self-control. And those elements are very similar to some elements in Buddhism, and especially compassion, self-control, mind training, all that. So I was raised by, my family who really, really valued these codes. And so how it's impacted me as an artist is, for example, it's a very simple example, but when I work with somebody on a project, a lot of times artists are seen as very kind of self-centered, selfish, self-destructive, typical, image of artists. But how I try to work is really respect other people's time and schedule, and I try to bring those codes into work. That really, really impacted me as a professional artist, because a lot of times I work on the projects with somebody and then, I never miss the deadline, because, that it's really, really related to, you have to respect your, your colleagues' time and energy, and, you have to work as a team and all that. So that's just one example, but I think ultimately what really impacted me is the self-control part, the mind training and compassion. And I grew up in Japan until I was 14, 15. Our culture is based on those codes without even knowing. So, like, for example, when tsunami came, everybody behaved so politely, and we didn't have any chaos. And the world was asking why? And then the answer was very simple, because we live by those codes. But a lot of people may not know it, even in Japan, because it's deeply in the culture. I don't know if I answered the questions, but yeah. So
No, that was very interesting. Yeah, and it is fascinating to observe too, for people who come from different cultural backgrounds, or maybe have spent all their lives here in the West, and how there are different traditions and different values, and we can all learn from one another. So it's very valuable to hear about some of the values that you have in Japanese culture that I think could help people here as well. So thank you for sharing that. We're almost out of time, but I do want to ask you one final question here. You mentioned something earlier that really fascinated me when you said art is not a goal, it's only a tool to serve others. And so as we're wrapping up here, I know in my own personal experience, I do know many people who are also interested in Buddhism and are also creative, and they like to create things. And at times it can almost feel like those things are in conflict because, as you mentioned, sometimes there can be a perception that to be an artist, you have to be very self-centered, or you just have to do what makes you happy and not necessarily think about the bigger consequences of the work you're doing. So I was just kind of wondering, maybe if you can give some final words for our audience, for people who are interested in art, but also do want to practice compassion and try to help others. Are there any pieces of advice or tips or encouragement that you could share with folks about how they can also use their creative abilities to help spread compassion?
Yes, great question. Deep question. Thank you.
Right.
I hope I can answer shortly. So yes, when I was young, my first dealer told me, okay, Rima, if you want to make it in the commercial art world, you have to be selfish, you have to be greedy, you have to be, self-centered and, all that stuff. And I was like, what? I didn't want to hear that. But I do see that is true in a way. But at the end, I think it's your choice, what you choose and what means the best to you, because everybody's different. There's no right or wrong in the arts.
Mm-hmm.
And what works for you is the right choice for you. I have artist friends who only want to make money because that's what they want to do. And it's a good choice for them because it's the right thing to do. It didn't happen to be the choice for me. For me, art is, again, only a tool so that I can contribute to something to make this world a better place. A small contribution I can make. But that makes me happy. That makes my heart rich. And I just thrive for it. So I know that it's the right choice for me. So everybody's different. So I would suggest for those young artists, if you're watching, just find out what's right for you and what makes you happy. There's no right or wrong. But what's important for everyone is to use your talent to make this world a better place, because that's why we're all here on this earth.
Absolutely.
That's for everyone.
That's for everyone, right? Exactly. Whether you're an artist or whatever you do in life, whatever you're best at, try to make the world a better place.
Yes. Yes.
So I think that's the perfect note to end on, and a great encouragement for people. So thank you for that, and thank you once again for being here for this conversation. We really valued it. Thank you, Tencho, for moderating. And since this actually is our final Tibet Talks of 2021, we just want to say once again to our audience, thank you so much for your support and for sticking with us and helping ICT throughout this past year. We know this continues to be a challenging time for everyone, but I know your support has meant a lot to me. It's meant a lot to Tencho. It's meant a lot for ICT and allowed us to continue the work that we do on behalf of the Tibetan people. So thank you for being part of that. We will be back with more Tibet Talks episodes in the new year. Until then, we wish you all a wonderful, safe, happy, and healthy holiday season and end to this year. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rima-san.
Thank you so much.
Ashwin. Thank you.
Thank you,
Ashwin. Thank you, Tenjola. Thank you.
Thank you.